My name is Clara Jennings. I'm 24 years old, and if you flip through our family albums, you might miss me entirely. I'm there, of course, smiling, hands folded neatly, always standing just off to the side. But somehow, I never really filled the frame, not the way my younger sister Fiona did. We grew up in a cozy two-story home in suburban Ohio. It had everything a family could ask for: a green lawn, a porch swing, and rows of framed photos lining the hallway. But if you looked closely, you'd notice the same pattern repeated in every shot: Fiona at the center, lit by everyone's attention, and me, the quiet one at the edge of the frame. Fiona was 2 years younger, but always felt like she was 10 steps ahead. She had that kind of effortless shine that people gravitated toward: blonde curls, a natural charm, quick wit. At school, teachers adored her. At home, our parents Richard and Linda treated her like she was made of gold. My father, a bank loan officer, once told a neighbor at a barbecue, "Fiona's got real potential." He paused then, glancing toward me. "Clara, well, she's independent." That word independent was their favorite label for me. It sounded like a compliment, but it always felt like a polite way to say, "She'll be fine on her own, so let's focus elsewhere." Christmas mornings captured the imbalance with brutal clarity. Fiona would unwrap high-end dollhouses, science kits, or new tablets. I'd receive practical gifts: a stack of notebooks, wool socks, or a flashlight. "Clara's not the type to need flashy things," Mom would say with a smile. "She's sensible." Even at age 8, I understood. I wasn't the one they were betting on. But there was one person who saw me, really saw me. Grandma May, my mother's mother, lived in a creaky little cottage on the edge of town. Every summer, I'd stay with her for 2 blissful weeks. While Fiona went off to drama camp or debate workshops funded by our parents, I sat on May's back porch, sketching birds and cataloging the shapes of passing clouds. "You've got a clever eye," she'd say, peering at my drawings, not just artistic, strategic. "You see things most people overlook." It was in her attic library, dusty and sunlit, that I discovered books about entrepreneurs, inventors, and quietly defiant women who built empires from the shadows. I wasn't interested in being famous. I wanted to be undeniable. So I made myself a silent promise I would build something they couldn't ignore. Not to win their affection, that ship had sailed. I just wanted them to see me for who I truly was. And one day, when the spotlight found me, I would not be the one standing quietly at the edge of the photo. I would be the reason they finally looked beyond the center. And they'd wonder how they missed me for so long. They say the camera never lies, but it doesn't always tell the full story either. In those photos where Fiona stood beaming and I stood just outside the spotlight, I used to think that someday I'd find my way into the center. I didn't expect that the first time I'd truly feel seen would be the same night I heard the sentence that quietly shattered me. It was a Thursday in early spring when the envelopes arrived, those thick, hopeful packages that smelled like ink and possibility. Fiona and I had both applied to Brightmoor University. It was the one school that dared to dream bigger than even she did, a place where future diplomats, CEOs, and disruptors carved out their paths. Brightmoor had always been my target. I'd spent years researching its business program, its entrepreneurship incubator, its faculty. I didn't just want to go there. I had a plan for why. We received our letters on the same day. I remember opening mine in the hallway, the paper trembling in my hands as I read, "Congratulations on your acceptance to the Brightmoor School of Business." I'd gotten in. I ran into the kitchen, breathless, holding the letter like it was a passport to a new life. "Mom, Dad, I got in Brightmoor." My father looked up from his phone briefly. "That's great. Clara," he said, in the same tone he used when I told him I'd fixed the leaky faucet once. My mother offered a distracted smile. Did Fiona hear yet? As if on cue. The front door burst open and Fiona came twirling in, waving her own envelope above her head like a victory flag. Brightmoor Political Science I got in, too. The house lit up around her. Dad jumped to his feet. Mom screamed with delight. They popped a bottle of champagne they just happened to have and ordered takeout from Fiona's favorite sushi place. I sat at the kitchen table, my unopened sparkling water in front of me, slowly realizing that once again, I'd been outshined by default. That night, Fiona's acceptance became a family holiday. Mine became a footnote. 2 weeks later came the dinner that would change everything. We were all seated together for once. No phones, no distractions, just a roast chicken and the illusion of unity. Halfway through the meal, Dad cleared his throat and said, "So, college plans. We've been discussing finances." He looked only at Fiona. "We've decided to fully fund your tuition at Brightmoor. We want you to focus completely on your studies." Fiona beamed, her fork frozen mid-air. "Are you serious? Oh my God, thank you." I smiled faintly, waiting. Surely there was more. Then silence. The pause stretched long enough to turn the air solid. I finally asked, "And what about me?" Dad's eyes met mine, cold, decisive. "We've only saved enough for one of you," he said evenly. "Fiona's program is a better investment. She's always shown more. Promise." I blinked. "But I have better grades," I said, though the words sounded far away. "I've worked part-time since sophomore year. I've won competitions." "How am I not, Clara?" Mom cut in, her voice the faux soft tone she used when explaining to strangers that I was the practical one. "You've always been independent. We thought you could find your own way. Fiona needs the support more. And let's be honest, she deserves it. She deserves it." That sentence broke something in me. Not loudly, not with shouting or slammed doors. It broke like glass under pressure, silent, sharp, impossible to repair the same way. Dinner continued as though nothing had been said. They moved on to talk about dorm decorations and housing deposits, while I stared at the mashed potatoes on my plate like they might anchor me to the earth. I don't remember what I said when I excused myself from the table, only that I climbed the stairs with mechanical precision and shut the door to my room before letting the tears fall. That night, I grieved a version of my family that had only ever existed in hope. I realized I could never earn their love the way I wanted, not through performance, not through achievement, not even through loyalty. I'd been auditioning for years in a play where the lead role had already been cast, and I wasn't even in the understudy list. The next morning, my eyes were swollen, but my resolve was clear. I approached my parents at the kitchen counter, clutching my acceptance letter. "I'm still going to Brightmoor," I said quietly. "I'll find a way." Dad barely glanced up from his newspaper. "If you insist," he murmured. "Just make sure you don't take on more than you can handle. It's not like you have a clear plan." I turned to Mom. "Do you even know what I'm majoring in?" She looked startled. "Something with business, right? You always liked that shark show." "It's called entrepreneurship," I said, my voice calm. "And one day, I'll make it mean something." They didn't respond. 2 days later, I packed a weekend bag and drove 2 hours to Grandma May's cottage. I didn't say much. I didn't have to. She listened. She brewed tea. She held my hands like they were precious things. "You're a diamond, Clara," she whispered. "They don't see it yet. But they will. Just let the pressure do its job." That was the moment I decided I would go to Brightmoor. I would work harder than I ever had. I wouldn't prove them wrong to hurt them. I'd prove them wrong because I needed to know, once and for all, that they were wrong about me. I left Grandma May's cottage with nothing but a duffel bag, a secondhand laptop, and a determination sharper than any resentment I had ever felt. She hugged me tightly at the door, pressed a folded note into my palm, and said only, "Pressure makes diamonds. Clara." I didn't know then how often I'd unfold that note at 2 reading those same 5 words to keep myself from breaking. Brightmoor University was beautiful and overwhelming. Historic brick buildings, manicured lawns, and students who looked like they belonged in glossy brochures. I arrived alone in my battered Corolla. its air conditioning long dead and the back seats stuffed with mismatched dishes and thrifted cookware. Fiona, of course, had moved into the newly renovated dorms a week earlier with our parents, movers, and 2 new suitcases in tow. She texted me a photo of her room, captioned, "So cute." "Right," I replied with a thumbs-up emoji, though I was currently dragging a mattress up 3 flights of stairs in an off-campus walk-up with no elevator. My apartment was 45 minutes from campus by bus, shared with 3 strangers I'd met on a housing forum. The walls were thin, the plumbing moody, and the air smelled like old ramen and mildew. My room had no desk, so I studied at a folding table wedged between a window and a radiator that hissed like it resented my presence. That first week, I juggled orientation, unpacking, and 2 part-time jobs, early mornings at a campus cafe and weekend shifts at a used bookstore downtown. Every penny mattered. I tracked expenses in a color-coded spreadsheet, down to the granola bars I bought in bulk. Fiona sent updates about sorority rush events, late-night pizza parties, and shopping trips with her roommate. I didn't reply often. There was nothing to say. Still, I showed up to every lecture, every tutorial, every opportunity to sit in the front row and prove to myself I belonged. My professors noticed, especially Professor Lindstrom, who taught Intro to Entrepreneurial Models. After my second class presentation, she asked to speak with me. "You've got a mind for systems," she said, tapping her pen against the edge of my worksheet. "You think like a strategist. Have you considered starting something of your own?" I hadn't. Not seriously. But that night, lying on my lumpy mattress under a flickering ceiling light, I remembered the idea I'd scribbled once in high school: virtual assistant services for small businesses that couldn't afford full-time help. Administrative support, content scheduling, email follow-ups. Unsexy but necessary work. I opened my laptop, registered a basic domain, and built a landing page on a free website builder before I fell asleep. In 2 weeks, I had my first client, a local bakery that needed help organizing their catering calendar. I used my cafe break to manage their emails. Within a month, I had 3 more. I worked on buses, between shifts, and during lunch breaks. The margins were thin, but they were mine. I still remember the first time I considered quitting. It was October. Midterms. I'd pulled 3 all-nighters. My cafe manager had cut my hours due to budget constraints, and I had $15 left until my next paycheck. I opened the fridge to find only mustard, expired yogurt, and a half loaf of bread. I sat on the kitchen floor, back against the door, too tired to cry. Then Zara found me. She was my newest roommate, quiet, observant, and fiercely private. She crouched down beside me with a Tupperware of rice and lentils and placed it in my lap. "You can't run an empire on an empty stomach," she said. From that night on, she fed me without asking. Left meals labeled Clara in the fridge, pushed snacks into my backpack when I wasn't looking. I offered to pay, but she refused. My dad used to say, "Family feeds family." You're family now. Zara became my anchor. She edited my essays when my eyes blurred, made flashcards while I rewrote service proposals. When she saw me skipping dinner to meet a client deadline, she threatened to change the Wi-Fi password unless I sat down and ate. I didn't argue. I couldn't. She had earned the right to boss me around. Grandma May texted me every Sunday night without fail. Sometimes just a heart, sometimes a photo of the lake, but always with the same sign-off: "They'll see you one day." But even if they don't shine anyway, by the end of freshman year, I had maintained a 4.0 GPA, retained all 5 clients, and saved enough to pay half my rent for the summer in advance. Fiona came home for spring break with new clothes and stories about Europe's study abroad programs. I stayed in town to take extra business credits and build my client base. One afternoon, Fiona called for the first time in months. "How are things?" she asked, her voice breezy. I looked at my desk covered in receipts, notebooks, and a cup of instant noodles and said, "Busy." "You always were the serious one." She laughed. "Maybe." But I was also building something they'd never seen coming. Something I was no longer doing just to prove them wrong. I was doing it because I finally believed I could. By the end of my sophomore year, I was no longer just surviving. I was thriving, though still in silence. My virtual assistant business had grown. My grades remained flawless, and I'd been nominated for a competitive entrepreneurship scholarship that would determine the course of my final year. For the first time, I allowed myself to feel something dangerously close to hope. Junior year began with momentum I hadn't dared to expect. In September, the university's business faculty held its annual Innovation Awards. I didn't even attend the ceremony. I had a client pitch to finish that night and couldn't afford the time. The next morning, I opened an email from the department head. "Congratulations, Clara Jennings. You've been selected as Student Entrepreneur of the Year." Along with the award came a full tuition scholarship for my senior year and a faculty-funded grant to help scale my business. I stared at the screen for a long time before rereading the subject line, just to be sure it was real. That afternoon, I called Grandma May. She didn't say much, just cried quietly and whispered, "They'll know soon. They'll have to." What neither of us knew then was that the shift would come far sooner than expected, and from a place I never imagined Fiona. She showed up at my apartment in late October. It was a cold Thursday night, and I was elbow deep in market research reports when the buzzer rang. I opened the door to find her standing there, mascara smudged, holding a laptop and a stack of crumpled papers. "I didn't know where else to go," she said. I stepped aside, silently gesturing for her to come in. She dropped onto my battered couch and took a shaky breath. "My thesis? It's falling apart." "My advisor said my framework's all wrong, and I have 3 weeks to rewrite it or I don't graduate." Her voice cracked on the last word, and I saw something raw in her eyes. Fear, not of failure, but of finally not being able to coast. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to let her drown in her own entitlement. The other part, the part that still remembered how it felt to be overlooked, unsupported, and scared, took over. "Let me see what you've got," I said. We spent the next 4 hours dissecting her argument, rebuilding it piece by piece. What she had wasn't useless. It just lacked structure, discipline, and honest feedback, things I'd spent years cultivating on my own. That night became the first of many. We met twice a week in the corner of the campus library. I brought coffee and highlighters. She brought questions and surprisingly few defenses. The more we worked, the more I realized how little she actually understood about the world she thought she owned. "You've been doing this alone all these years," she asked one night, eyes wide as I mapped out my schedule on a napkin. "Mostly," I replied. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" Would it have changed anything? I asked quietly. Would Mom and Dad have taken their money back from you and given it to me? She didn't answer. She didn't need to. What changed in the following weeks wasn't just her thesis. It was us. Fiona began to sit with me even after we finished her work. She asked about my clients, about the competition I was applying to, about the business I'd built from nothing. When our parents called her, she answered but no longer shared much. At Thanksgiving, she declined the plane ticket our parents offered and instead stayed with me and Grandma May. Over mashed potatoes and late-night tea, she leaned in and whispered, "I used to think you were just distant, but now I realize you were surviving in a world where no one showed up for you." It wasn't an apology. Not exactly, but it was a beginning. A week later, I received notice that I'd been selected as a finalist for the National Student Startup Challenge, an opportunity that could launch my company into a fully funded venture. Fiona screamed louder than I did. She posted about it on her social media before I even got the chance. For the first time, she was proud of me. And for the first time, I didn't feel completely alone. We weren't close, not yet, but we were no longer pretending. That winter, Fiona invited me to her apartment to decorate a tiny fake Christmas tree. There were no parents, no forced cheer, no hierarchy. Just 2 women who had grown up under the same roof, but only just now begun to meet each other properly. "You know," she said, stringing lights around the tiny branches, "I used to think being the favorite was something I earned, but now I think it was just something I was handed, and didn't know what to do with." I looked at her. This girl who had once been the center of every photo, and saw a softness I hadn't known was there. You're doing something with it now, I said. She smiled. That night, as I walked home through the frostbitten streets, I thought about how strange it is when the tables turn, not with vengeance, but with grace. I didn't help Fiona to forgive her. I helped her because I knew what it felt like to have no one. And maybe, just maybe, I didn't want her to feel that way too. Fiona and I had crossed an invisible threshold in our relationship, no longer sisters defined by rivalry, but women bonded by truth. Still, even with our growing understanding, there remained one final silence that had yet to be broken, the silence of our parents. That would change soon, and not because I planned it, but because some moments demand to be seen. 2 months before graduation, I received an email from Dean Whitaker, the head of the business faculty. It was simple, almost formal. Clara Jennings, we would like to invite you to deliver the student address at this year's commencement ceremony. Please see me this week to discuss details. I read it 3 times before letting myself breathe. When I arrived at her office, Dean Whitaker greeted me with a knowing smile. Clara, we followed your journey closely. Your grades, your business, your mentorship of other students. It's rare we find someone who embodies the spirit of this university so completely. I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm honored. I just hope I can do it justice. There's one more thing, she added, almost as an afterthought. There will be a brief extension after your speech. Just follow the cues. Consider it a surprise. She didn't elaborate, and I didn't ask. I didn't need to know. I had already lived the real speech. I only needed to tell it. On graduation day, the sky was impossibly blue, as if the universe itself had been waiting for this unveiling. I dressed carefully, my robe freshly pressed, shoes that clicked confidently with each step. Around my shoulders, I draped the special sash Grandma May had given me, embroidered with gold thread. Pressure makes diamonds. Zara drove me to campus, shouting encouragement the whole way. They're going to eat out of your hand. Jennings, she laughed. And if they don't, I will stand up and start the applause myself. I arrived at the staging area and found Fiona already robed and radiant, her nerves dancing behind a bright smile. I'm proud of you, she whispered as we lined up. No matter what they think, this is your moment. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My throat was too tight. We filed into the auditorium to the rise of ceremonial music, surrounded by hundreds of other graduates. I spotted my parents in the crowd immediately. My father in his best gray suit, seated near the center aisle, my mother with a large sun hat, turning toward Fiona as she passed with a camera in hand. Neither of them noticed me until I walked just a few feet behind. That would change soon. The ceremony opened with the usual speeches: the university president, a guest speaker, a performance from the choir. I listened only half-heartedly, my pulse ticking in my ears. Finally, Dean Whitaker approached the podium, and now it is my honor to introduce the 2023 student address, delivered by a young woman whose story is one of resilience, creativity, and unshakable will. Please welcome Clara Jennings of the School of Business. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I saw my parents' heads turn in unison, confusion first, then dawning surprise. I stepped up to the podium, took a deep breath, and looked out over a sea of expectant faces. I arrived at this university with nothing but a secondhand laptop and a determination forged by necessity. I began. No safety net, no financial backing, no soft place to land. I've worked 3 jobs, taken night classes, and built a business from the floor of a shared apartment I could barely afford. I paused, letting the words settle. I've also learned that the greatest achievements are not the ones most applauded, but the ones fought for in silence. When no one believes in you, when even your own family writes you off, that's when you learn what you're really made of. The auditorium was silent. Even the photographers stopped clicking. Pressure, I said slowly, can crush you. but it can also crystallize you. I ended to a wave of thunderous applause that grew louder as I stepped aside, and President Harrell returned to the stage. He waited for quiet, then continued. What many of you may not know is that Ms. Jennings not only graduates today with the highest academic honors in her department, but also as the recipient of the National Student Startup Challenge. Her business, now valued in 6 figures, has already created employment opportunities for her peers. There were gasps. A few claps began again. But perhaps most remarkable, he continued, his eyes scanning the crowd, is that Clara has done all of this without any financial support from her family. Her journey has redefined what it means to earn success. The applause became a standing ovation. I glanced toward my parents, my mother's face pale, my father blinking like he was trying to undo what he'd just heard. And today, the president concluded, in recognition of her courage and contribution, the university is proud to announce the creation of the Jennings Resilience Scholarship, supporting students who rise despite adversity. The words hung in the air like judgment. My name, on a scholarship. My name, spoken with honor. My name, no longer the one forgotten. As I returned to my seat, Fiona reached for my hand and squeezed it hard. She was crying openly now. They see you, she whispered. They all see you now. I smiled not out of vengeance, not out of pride, but from something deeper. Recognition, finally, but more importantly, release. The applause from the auditorium still echoed in my ears as the celebration wound down. I had been truly seen for the first time, not just by strangers, but by the very people who had once overlooked me. But recognition in public didn't automatically rewrite private history. That rewriting would happen in smaller rooms, in quieter moments. It began that evening, at the family dinner they'd planned mostly for Fiona. The rental house was buzzing with relatives. My mother greeted me at the door, voice soft, eyes cautious. We're glad you could make it, she said, as if unsure whether I would stay. I walked in calmly. Fiona and Grandma May beside me. Conversations hushed as we entered. Then came the questions curious, hesitant, but genuine. So you run your own company. I read about the scholarship. That's incredible. You built it all on your own. I answered each with measured clarity, not boastful, not bitter. Yes. I built it from the ground up while studying full-time. It's still growing. Aunt Miriam blinked, visibly stunned. Why haven't we heard about this before? Before I could respond, Fiona stepped forward, because no one asked. No one ever asked about Clara's path. She didn't just succeed, she did it without the support most of us take for granted. The room went still. My father cleared his throat. We're very proud of her, of course. I nodded politely. Thank you. But pride isn't what I was looking for. I didn't do any of this to be approved. I did it because I could, because I had to. From across the room, Grandma May's voice rang clear and steady. Family isn't who shares your name. It's who sees your worth, especially when no one else does. There was silence again, but this time it wasn't empty. It was full of shifting weight. Later, as dessert was cleared and chairs pushed back, my parents approached me in private. My mother tried to smile. We didn't know you had come this far. Clara, maybe we didn't look hard enough. My response was quiet. You looked exactly where you wanted to. Just not at me, Dad added. If there's anything we can do now. There's nothing to fix, I interrupted gently. This isn't about mending the past. It's about understanding where I go from here and who comes with me. They didn't argue. For once, they just listened. When it was time to leave, I stood up, tucked my chair in, and turned toward the front door. Where are you headed? My father asked. I looked toward Fiona and Grandma May, waiting by the porch. I'm going with the people who never asked me to shrink. Then I walked out, In the quiet that followed, I realized something I hadn't been able to name before. My worth was never something others had the power to give or to take away. I had spent years waiting for a seat at their table, not realizing I was meant to build my own. I no longer needed applause, no longer needed permission. The girl who once stood at the edge of the photo had learned how to center herself not with noise, but with truth. There are moments that change us, some loud, some subtle. Mine came not with anger, but with clarity. That day, I didn't raise my voice. I just raised my standard. And when I turned the knob, stepped outside, and closed the door behind me, it wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. Because true worth needs no spotlight, and dignity once claimed cannot be taken away.